What if a religious group, convinced the end of the world was near, was raided by the federal government? What if a 51-day standoff ended in a fire that killed more than 70 people, including 25 children? The government called it a necessary action against a dangerous cult. The survivors called it a massacre. But what if the real story behind the tragedy is even stranger? Today, True Evil Crime presents the real story of the Branch Davidians and the Waco siege. We'll follow the exact timeline that led to the Waco tragedy. We'll uncover the man who built this apocalyptic prophecy, the government's flawed plan, the failed raid, and the shocking decisions that fueled a final, fatal fire. The Branch Davidians didn't begin with David Koresh. It started back in the 1930s with a prophet named Victor Hodef, but the real road to tragedy began in the 1980s when a young, charming man named Vernon Wayne Howell joined the group. Soon, he was fighting with the former leader's son, George Roden, over who should be in charge. Then, something unexpected happened. Roden dug up a coffin and challenged Howell to prove himself by raising the dead, claiming it would show who was chosen by God. The fight quickly got out of control and ended in a violent shootout. George Roden was wounded and Howell walked free and took control. But how did Vernon Howell transform into David Koresh, the man behind the Waco siege? In 1989, Howell legally changed his name to David Koresh, believing he was God's final prophet. His new teachings were extreme. He claimed God told him to create a house of David by having children with all the women in the group, ending every other marriage. This belief turned his followers into a loyal, closed-off community, ready for a violent end-times battle. And Koresh didn't hide it. His followers were gathering weapons, running an illegal arms business, and building a stash of military-grade guns and explosives. Koresh's followers had built up a massive stockpile of weapons, including machine guns and grenade parts. It was more than enough to draw the attention of federal agents. But here's the shocking part. The government's first warrant to raid them was based on a specific claim. That wasn't true. This lie became the key to their entire plan. So, what exactly was the false story? And why was it so important to a raid that would end in disaster? To get approval for a raid and access to military equipment they normally couldn't use, the ATF told the Defense Department a flat-out lie that the Branch Davidians were running a drug lab. That fake drug connection let them dodge legal roadblocks. Their big plan, a surprise raid called Operation Trojan Horse. But come the morning of the raid, the surprise was gone. An undercover agent inside tipped off his bosses. The Davidians were armed and waiting. Despite knowing their cover was blown, the ATF's senior commanders recklessly gave the order to proceed. What followed was chaos, a 2-hour shootout that left 4 ATF agents dead and many more injured. But this disastrous failure wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a 51-day siege. The FBI took command, bringing in negotiators and a tactical team. They managed to convince 35 people to leave, including 21 children. But the negotiations hit a dead stop, and the tactical team's frustration grew. Why? Did the FBI dismiss Koresh's religious beliefs? And what was the critical reason Attorney General Janet Reno approved the use of force, a decision that led to the final tragedy? Under pressure, Attorney General Janet Reno approved a final plan based on justifications that later congressional investigations would find lacked merit. On April 19, 1993, the final assault began. The FBI used armored vehicles to punch holes in the compound and pump in CS gas. Their plan was to force the Davidians out, not to kill them. But Congress would later find that the tactical commanders had closed minds to any negotiated solution. Just after noon, with the gas assault still underway, fires erupted in 3 different locations, almost simultaneously. The government immediately claimed the Davidians started the fires. For years, that was the official story. But the government's story was not complete. Why would it take 6 long years for a stunning new revelation to emerge about the FBI's own actions that day? A revelation that would strip away the government's credibility forever? For more than 6 years, the government denied ever using pyrotechnic tear gas rounds, devices that explode with a flash and could easily ignite a fire. But an investigation led by Special Counsel John C. Danforth uncovered the truth. The FBI had fired 3 of these rounds toward the back of the building. The admission was a bombshell, proof the government had concealed a potentially explosive detail from the American people. Danforth's final report still concluded that the Davidians set the fires themselves, citing their own recorded conversations and the near-simultaneous ignition points. But the government's cover-up shattered its credibility, and it left the public asking, if they lied about this, what else were they hiding? The fire took the lives of 76 Branch Davidians, including 25 children. Autopsies revealed a horrific truth about the final moments. Koresh died from a single gunshot to the head. At least 20 other Davidians, including 5 children under the age of 14, also died from gunshot wounds. Medical examiners concluded these were mercy killings by followers trapped by the flames. The government was largely exonerated of the most serious charges, but the series of institutional failures, the ATF's deceptive tactics, the FBI's disregard for negotiation experts, and the government's long-term cover-up left a permanent scar. The siege became a rallying cry for the anti-government militia movement and directly inspired Timothy McVeigh to carry out the Oklahoma City bombing exactly 2 years later. The most damaging legacy, however, was the profound erosion of public trust. A 1999 poll showed that 61% of Americans believed the government started the fire at Waco, despite official findings to the contrary. Special Counsel Danforth himself stated that the government's secrecy cost the country an immeasurable amount of damage to the public's confidence. The legacy of Waco is not just the 82 people who died, but the lasting damage to the relationship between the American public and its government. It exposed dangerous trends toward the militarization of civilian police and the high-stakes risks of applying tactical solutions to complex religious and social problems. Waco stands as a sober reminder of what can happen when prophecy, power, and a lack of accountability collide, and how the absence of transparency can be just as destructive as the tragedy itself.